All right, what's up everyone? This is Dino from Sentiment. Just wanted to jump on here and record a short video because there's been a lot of interesting activity in terms of Bitcoin and Ethereum's exchange metrics over the last 24 to 36 hours. And I think it's important to get on a stream here and maybe talk 10 to 15 minutes about what I think it means. So I've also written about Bitcoin's exchange inflow spikes yesterday in our weekly report, so you can check that out for more information on this and other metrics on insights.sentiment.net. But essentially what we're seeing, first of all, it started yesterday with Bitcoin. We've seen one of the biggest spikes in Bitcoin's exchange inflow this year. In fact, if I zoom out to the last year of data, you will see that this is by far the biggest spike in the amount of BTC moving from individual addresses to known exchange wallets over the last 365 days. And if I zoom out a little bit more, you will notice, let me zoom out a bit more here as well. There we go. There we go. So you'll notice that this is essentially the biggest spike in Bitcoin's exchange inflow since the Black Thursday last year. So what does this mean? Well, first of all, we need to check whether there's a coinciding or correlating outflow of Bitcoin away from exchanges, because that would more likely point to arbitrage. So the way that we do that is we look at the exchange flow balance for Bitcoin, which is essentially going to show us whether this spike is legitimate in terms of whether there's actually a lot more Bitcoin moving to exchanges than from exchanges. And then if we zoom into the last 6 months, we will in fact see one of the larger spikes in Bitcoin's exchange flow balance over the last 6 months, essentially one of the biggest ones since the start of the correction here. So indeed, both the inflow of Bitcoin to exchanges and the net flow of Bitcoin from and to exchange wallets is in favor of more Bitcoin being moved to exchanges. So essentially, over the last 24 to 36 hours, we have seen one of the largest inflows of BTC to exchanges, which points to a potential of that some large addresses are looking to offload parts of their Bitcoin holdings and take some profits. So essentially, on-chain analysts believe that spikes in exchange inflow and exchange flow balance point to a period in time where addresses are looking to claim some of their profits, reduce their exposure, and this is obviously happening right as Bitcoin broke 50K, so it seems like at least some large addresses might be a little bit concerned about Bitcoin's future price potential and are looking to sort of take their profits at this resistance level. So this is what we've seen with Bitcoin yesterday. And then maybe 12 hours later, the same thing happened with Ethereum. So this is Ethereum's exchange flow balance for the past 6 months. And then if I show you Ethereum's exchange inflow, yeah, it looks massive. And in fact, if I really zoom in to the last month of data, you will notice that it happened right before the crash from basically 3.3K all the way to 3.15 that we are around now. Actually, it's started to recover a little bit. But anyway, it was once again one of the largest spikes in the amount of Ethereum moving to exchanges in quite a while. It was the biggest spike in Ethereum moving to exchanges since the correction or since the sort of capitulation spikes that we've seen in late May. So one thing that we can do with Ethereum related events like this is we can look at the top transactions for a period of time and exactly figure out which are the transactions that are most likely sort of accountable for this spike in exchange inflow. The way that we can do this is we look at the top transactions table, and then we select the last 24 hours of data. And what we're going to get here is a list of the largest transactions involving Ethereum over the last 24 hours. We sorted by value from the highest to lowest, and immediately we see one transaction being not like the others. So there was a transaction of 599,999 Ethereum about, I think, 8 to 9 hours ago from an address that is not labeled as an exchange, as belonging to an exchange wallet, to an address that is clearly labeled as belonging to a centralized exchange. If we click on a transaction hash here, what we're going to see, it's going to open up our Etherscan here of the transaction. And we can indeed see there was a transaction 10 hours ago, in fact, from just a random address or at least an address that is not labeled as belonging to an exchange, to a Binance wallet. And this is almost $2 billion worth of Ethereum moving in a single transaction. Another thing that we can then do is we can click on the sender address and figure out what is the historical balance of this address. In other words, when has this address acquired Ethereum, and how much Ethereum does it still have, if it has any? In general, what is this address's behavior when it comes to Ethereum? So we're looking here at the in purple at the balance of Ethereum held by this address in the last year. Essentially, what you can see is that this address has acquired all of its Ethereum, all 600,000 Ethereum, right here at about $2,000 a pop in early July, and then it dumped all of it in one fell swoop about 10 hours ago to Binance. So again, a massive amount of, so basically $2 billion moving to exchanges. Obviously, we can't be 100% sure that all of this is going to immediately transform into sell-side pressure for Ethereum as well as Bitcoin, but it's certainly a sign that some large addresses may be looking to liquidate their positions a little bit, reduce their exposure for the time being. Obviously, like I said, this is only showing us what's happening in terms of network data or what's happening on the chain. We are not sure what happened once these both Bitcoin and Ethereum have moved to exchanges, mostly to Binance. However, the spikes in exchange inflow very often in the past have coincided with periods of either price corrections or price recoveries. In other words, they very often happen either at local tops or local bottoms for Bitcoin and Ethereum and a lot of other assets in general. So with all that being said, I would definitely suggest keeping an eye on both Bitcoin and Ethereum's exchange metrics in days to come. Also, maybe keeping an eye on this address in particular and what it does next. You can actually create alerts for this address in case it starts accumulating Ethereum once again. But it's certainly a little bit of a concerning signal from an on-chain perspective that all of a sudden, after a period of reduction in the availability of both Bitcoin and Ethereum on exchanges, we are now seeing a complete opposite trend. So I'll show that as well before I end this video. First of all, we're going to see the amount of Bitcoin that has been available on exchanges over the last, let's say, 6 months. So we click here, we'll search for supply on exchanges. And so what we see here, let's take last year actually, right? So what we see here is that there has been a clear divergence between Bitcoin's price action since the start of the month and the amount of Bitcoin that was available on exchanges. In fact, as the availability of Bitcoin on exchanges dropped, as the supply of Bitcoin that was available to trade declined on exchanges, so has the price started to rally. Similar thing we've seen at the beginning of the 2020 rally when there was a massive decline in the amount of Bitcoin available on exchanges. We see this every so often. And then more recently, when we zoom in, this is what we're seeing now over the last couple of days, basically 36 hours. There's once again a opposite effect or an opposite trend starting to occur, where the amount of Bitcoin found on exchanges is starting to rise. And as a result, or not necessarily as a result, but coincidentally at least, we are seeing a drop in the price of Bitcoin over the last 24 hours. And then if we look at if we look at Ethereum, we'll look at the same metric, supply on exchanges. Once again, very similar trend. So let's take last 6 months. There we go. So there has been a clear sort of reduction in the amount of Ethereum available on exchanges, and bam, just like that, this is what 600,000 Ethereum moving to exchanges will do to your charts. All of a sudden, there's a massive amount of new ETH available to trade on exchanges. So is this pure sell-side pressure? It remains to be seen, but it's certainly a sign that there might be a propensity of some whales to offload some of their positions and sort of reduce their exposure for the time being. That then poses the question, how capable will Ethereum and Bitcoin bulls be to absorb this type of sell-side pressure in the short term. That remains to be seen. But for more information on these metrics and other sort of metrics that explain where Bitcoin is at the moment, I strongly suggest checking out the insight or the report that we wrote yesterday on insights.sentiment.net, which talks in more detail about not just this metric, but also a bunch of other on-chain and social metrics for Bitcoin. So that's all I have for you today. Stay safe, guys. There's a few yellow flags now starting to appear in both Bitcoin and Ethereum's data. Definitely some caution up ahead. I'll be back in a couple of days with another follow-up video to see exactly what sort of an impact this metric has had on the price action and on other metrics, both in Bitcoin and Ethereum's on-chain data. All right, that's all from me today, guys. Talk to you in a couple of days. All right, take care.